Regularly scheduled meeting. My name is Jose Raja. I'm the president for the 2014 calendar period. Can I please have the commission starting with my left introduce themselves?
Michael Michelle, Queens Republic.
John Flatow, Brooklyn Democrat.
Bianca Perez, Bronx Democrat.
Executive staff?
Yes, Michael Ryan, Executive Director.
John Sanders, Deputy Executive Director.
Pamela Perkins, Administrative Manager.
Nina M. Crispino, Director of Personnel.
Kenneth Milton, Counsel to Commissioners.
Stephen Dankberg, Counsel to Commissioners. Steve Richmond, General Counsel. Raphael Smino, Deputy General Counsel.
All right. Mike Ryan?
Yes, as per the Commissioner's direction last week, I reached out to the Assembly Committee on Election Law with respect to the December 12th hearing. We discussed some of the issues of concern that the Commissioners expressed last week, and I also indicated to the committee that the board certainly wants to be cooperative and wants to be respectful of the work that the committee is doing. I received indication that there was going to be a reach out ultimately to others on the committee to make a determination what input, if any, would be necessary from the city board, and as of 1:45, I still remain awaiting that clarification. I left a message with the committee earlier today and suggested that we do have one more bite at this apple next week before the hearing date is scheduled to address the issue, but as of this point, I have nothing further to report on that.
Yes, Commissioner Fletcher.
Is there a piece of pending legislation that they want us to look at? What is this issue around the compliance unit?
It's not really clear. They gave us a right. That part I know. It is part of the budget hearing, but what's not clear is what they want us to comment on in terms of the role of the unit that was formed to investigate. And there's been some rancor back and forth, and I think I can safely say that, having watched the state board meeting, there was a council that was established, investigative council, and that council presently has at least 3 staff members, and the council wanted special investigator status given to herself and her staff. The significance of that would be that under the election law, if the State Board of Elections gives special investigator status to those individuals, they would then become peace officers, and they would also be permitted by virtue of their status as peace officers to carry firearms. There seemed to be some disagreement back and forth amongst the State Board Commissioners whether or not it was a good idea for them to do that, and as a momentary compromise until their next stated meeting, they granted special investigator status to the council, but not to the staff members. So they're kind of in a bit of a state of...
Only she can shoot us.
But they're in a bit of a state of flux. But it goes... the issue kind of fell at the feet of the firearm issue, but it's more than that, because by having special investigator status, that also gives her access to the law enforcement investigative databases, which is probably ultimately more important to the functionality of that unit than the firearm, but the firearm issue seemed to kind of bubble to the surface and be the point of contention amongst the state board. So I think collectively last week we had discussed that while that flux is going on, and considering the fact that the state board is the umbrella that oversees the city board, there is some question as to what we should properly be testifying to with respect to how we're going to be supervised and how we're potentially going to be investigated. So that was kind of the point of my inquiry to the committee, and that's what we're waiting for clarification on. in any event, I'm not concerned, and I'll cut Commissioner Michelle off to the chase. I'm not concerned that I would be at a loss of words if it ultimately was decided that we should testify. And I still think we have another bite at the apple next week to come up with better clarification from the state. And if we get that, then I'll bring it back to the commissioners next week. And it's not the type of complex testimony ultimately that will require hours and hours of preparation like some other testimonies, like our budget testimony. It really does take a lot of time to prepare for effectively.
Where is there documentation as to the authority of this new compliance unit? What would they be engaging in?
Commissioners, it was added to the election law last year in June. We can provide you with a copy. This was the compromise that was put in where the enforcement unit of the state board priorly that existed was abolished. They transferred those lines to the general counsel's office. And this was created a new position of enforcement counsel with a unique appointment process, appointed by the governor, confirmed by both houses of the legislature. And if necessary, if the state board on an investigatory matter is split, it gives the enforcement counsel the right to vote.
But it was put in place for campaign.
The right to, I'm sorry, the
The
right.
right to vote to determine whether or not to proceed with an investigation.
But it-
Right, most of this was based on for campaign contribution forms.
Well, it's the campaign, the enforcement unit,
For the
state board has jurisdiction both over campaign finance and violations of the election.
Most of this came about because of the forms the elected officials filled out, or their treasurers, that they had no knowledge of.
And it was a step, I think, even beyond that as well. The state board is the repository for campaign finance filings, and there was some public discussion about what the appropriate role of the state board is. Are they simply a repository, or do they have some some authority beyond being a repository to take action when there's issues associated with the filings? And I think one of the things that the state board testified to publicly was a staffing issue with respect to their ability to take action. And as you can imagine, that was quite a bit of public discussion back and forth between all the concerned parties, and then this was the ultimate outgrowth. The enforcement council unit was the ultimate outgrowth of all that discussion.
Does our board have any responsibility, custodial or otherwise, for campaign finance filings?
See, but
Commissioners, only, since the state board took authority, it's only for those candidates who either plan to and actually spend less than $1,000 in a campaign cycle. If it's over $1,000, they have to register both with us for, if it's an office, you can test it within the city of New York, such as a party position, but they file with the state board. And we have continuing responsibility for those persons who had to file with the board in the past and continue to have that obligation prior to the switchover date, which was 2011? 9 or 10. When the state, rather than doing duplicate filings, if you filed with the state, we just have, that's why we have it on the public access terminal, you can see the filing there. So we have historic materials going back beyond, from 2009 back, where they still have an ongoing reporting responsibility, and basically for party positions or municipal offices where they plan to spend or receive less than $1,000.
Less than 1,000, then we're responsible.
And we then have to do the in lieu of statement with us.
Years ago, maybe years ago, campaigns had to file with us and also with the state. In 2010, I think it was, 2010, the campaigns filed with the state. We had to control everything that who filed before. Any candidate or district lead or anybody running for office that spends less than $1,000, that doesn't go to the state, that's just by us. So they changed the rules a little.
What do we do with that information?
Excuse me?
What do we do with that information?
They're required to receive, file, and available for public inspection.
So we're a depository?
We're a repository.
Right, I mean, I think that's the short answer to Commissioner Flato's
Commissioners, we
question.
have, for those people who are required to file with us and don't, you still have the responsibility, if necessary, to take judicial proceedings to compel the filings. Anybody who owns.
But we don't
You
order.
said we commence a judicial
We
proceeding?
have, yes.
We have done that?
We had done that in the past, we haven't done.
When was the last time we did that?
Before I was,
Some time, right?
quite some time.
Delinquent filings, we have the ability to
Right.
follow up and say, you haven't submitted your campaign.
Yeah, I got one once.
Yeah, but we get that periodically from CRU and then.
Well, we get a list once a year.
List,
Right.
yes.
I mean, the
Who didn't
CRU's
file.
main focus is compliance, not judgments and lawsuits, although that is always an option. And they do vigorously pursue via phone calls and mailings to get people to file the appropriate forms. Generally speaking, it's the people we come into contact with are individuals that don't realize they have to file something, that say they're not going to raise or spend $1,000 or any money,
In lieu of statement.
or an in-law statement. And so a lot of times it'll be party position people who don't follow those documents. And
Now, if and when we identify an entity that's delinquent in filing, what follow-up responsibility do we have? Do we have the ability to find them, or
You have the-
do we
the
have
court-
to report them to the state board? What
You have the right to commence a proceeding in Supreme Court, which would result both in a compelling order directing them to file, as well as the court would impose a fine. And that's what the board's done in the past.
And as the change took effect in 2010, that in the law of diminishing returns, as the cutoff is,
only
$1,000
$1,000,
or less, it becomes a judgment as to how much resources the city board is going to expend to go after those individuals. And the historic cases, I will tell you, have been pursued in various ways by CRU, including at times.
CRU, our campaign records.
records unit, right? Including at times engaging commissioners and, candidate records unit, to reach out to individuals, because as council points out, sometimes it's folks that didn't know that they had a responsibility, or on some of the historic matters, it was an issue where they thought compliance was taken care of, and then when they find out that it hadn't been
Notified by us.
They do, not, I wouldn't say often, but often enough, they rectify the situation. And without naming some names, there have been some circumstances that have been resolved after 10 years or more, when things finally get put to rest, outstanding debt and those kinds of things.
And sometimes it's because the file stays open until you close it with a form. So some of them are state committee people, or county, and they run for office, they file the form once, then they forget that they have to close it out by making another statement. Am I correct?
Yeah, almost like a final
The
account.
final accounting you have to
Yeah.
do before, otherwise it just stays on there. There's some, if you look on campaign finance, there's some on there since 2001. And back in 1994, I could tell you some. They're no longer with us. But they don't remove them, that's all.
Thank you.
All right, is there a motion to go into an executive session for personnel
Mr.
matters?
President,
Yes?
we'd like to address the
Well,
board.
let this gentleman go first, since he had his hand up first.
John D. Smith. I am here to raise a question to Mr. Ryan. On November 18th, at the board meeting, this meeting, you... A little louder, please. I'm sorry. At the November 18th meeting, you spoke about the overvote issue in the write-in column. I would like to have a clarification on that because I don't understand it. I wasn't here this past Tuesday for the recanvassing. I failed to be aware that that occurred because I would have been there on that date to ask this question. Recanvassing. What I'm concerned about, thank you for putting on that, Mike. Where are these overvotes occurring in the write-in columns? What public offices are there identified? And what are the names of the write-in persons, such as, I suspect it may be Teachout, Zephyr Teachout, and Alton H. Maddox Jr., because there's a lot of write-ins that I saw on the ballots, which I looked at last night. I didn't have a lot of time to go through that process. But I would like to know the specifics of how this occurred, that is, overvote in the right-hand column. Would you please clarify that? And how does overvote occur in relates to write-in columns? I did not understand that when you expressed it on November 18th. I was here then.
What we were talking about was over, as I recall, and I mean, I could, anyone feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. What we were talking about was the potential, particularly in the governor's race, when you talk about what we call the wraparound. In other words, we don't have enough columns moving from left to right in order to fit all of the different candidates, parties, and independent bodies that may be associated with an election. So if you vote for more than one in that, that's going to give you an overvote message. Now, because of the timing marks across the top and across the bottom, and on the left side and the right side moving from top to bottom and top to bottom, there is always an issue with spacing on how perfectly the write-in box may line up with everything else. And that sometimes causes confusion. So when my recollection of what I was talking about overvotes was not that we were giving official credit one way or the other too much to one voter or not, is that if you get an overvote message from the machine and you elect, for lack of a better term, to ignore it, and you override it and your ballot gets counted, then that has to be accounted for ultimately in our final certification process. So to coin a phrase, that all of that stuff typically comes out in the wash, and to the extent that there's a need for it, ultimately there'll be a discrepancy report filed along with the results, which happens in every single election. So if you're going to ask me specific questions about specific candidates, I certainly don't have automatic or total recall on that, on those issues, but whatever information or a good chunk of the information that you might require is certainly available on our website in a candidate, in a assembly district by election district, full layout, any information that we have reported on officially, anything that was the subject of our certified elections last week is all there. And so if you have specific information that you're looking for, you certainly can find it there. And then beyond that, if there's some clarification that you would need once you've done your homework and your research, then we certainly can endeavor to answer those questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Perhaps to help out a little bit, I did check the Board of Elections website.
Yes.
And I specifically saw tallies, write-in tallies for Alton Maddox in the borough, and other candidates in the borough recaps that are sitting on the website. So
yes,
you would be able to track. I would think you can find your candidates.
Right, but it was, you were very emphatic as Commissioner Shimon asked about issues, and you specifically identified write-ins as a problem in this current November 4th, 2014 election.
And what
therefore,
I think, sir, and I could be wrong, and certainly I'd be happy to go back and look at the video and clarify for myself, what happened, more than 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago now. But as I recollect, we were talking about the issue with respect to the overvote message on the DS200 scanner, not overvotes in the way that you seem to be describing them. We use overvote as a very specific term of art within the Board of Elections. That's not meant to be interpreted as somebody got too many votes. Right? So it's a question of, if you go in and it says vote for 1 and you vote for 2, that's an overvote. If you're in a judge race and it says pick any 4 and you vote for 5, that's an overvote. And those are discrepancies that ultimately have to be resolved in the comprehensive recanvassing process that New York State requires us to do to certify an election.
I believe that the overvote needs to be looked at more thoroughly, and citizens, voters must be protected if they choose overvote, write-in, not overvote, correction, then their write-in vote must be protected. And therefore, I suggest that this board and the ES&S do a better job in protecting the voters who do not accept the officers who are officially on the ballot. This occurred in 2010, a tremendous amount of overvoting for the parties Rent Too Damn High and the Freedom Party. Tens of thousands and perhaps 100,000 votes eliminated on the claim that there was overvoting. Now, it seems to me that these two parties should be recognized as official parties, because if the machines fail to properly identify, I don't think it was the individual's problem. I think it was the failure in this system, and it must be corrected. And I hope that the state, and I'm sure the state will listen to this hearing video, will make amends in the ES&S. I recall in 2010 that Mr. Humane, Commissioner Humane, who's not here, had an issue with in November 23rd, 2010, agenda item 2B, which was a report on subjective nature of the 3% audit. As of this date, there has not been an official accounting of that subjectivity and the loss of votes, overvotes, for all those two parties in particular. I see there are 3 current third parties that are on the ballot, but yet these 2 particular parties, they should be on the ballot as well, and they have been victimized by this system.
Mr. Flax?
Alan Flax, New York County Democratic Committee. I would first like to concur with the plaint of the prior person, PPP. I might also remind you that I understand, or I was told, that most of those results that you say are on the internet were taken down after certification. That's what I was told, that they will be taken down.
The unofficial results are removed and replaced with the official results, so that there is no lack of clarity or confusion as to what the appropriate outcome is. That's done, Mr. Flax, as I'm sure you're aware, every election. It's not a new thing.
But I heard say, and I haven't looked, that the election district by election district results are not there.
It depends on how you view the information. You can choose to view the information in a summary, but if you click on any one of the, I think it's a light blue, and you click on the light blue, it'll expand your field. And so if you want to look at...
We'll have the election district.
Absolutely.
So I shall look at that.
We wouldn't deign to deprive you of any information that you're legally entitled to, Mr. Flax, or any other member citizen.
And also, a state law from 3 Februarys ago encourages the use of electronic data. But if anyone asks you for a hard copy of it, that has to be made available on the state, county, and municipal level public agencies. I want to raise the issue I looked at the write-in votes for the city, and there are too many unattributables. And we're told that it was a ruling of you and all of you, perhaps through Stephen Richmond, that wants, oh, if it's Mickey Mouse, we don't record it. That's not the New York State election law, nor was it the interpretation of the person I referred to as that boy in Albany, since you don't like that, our man in Havana, Douglas Kellner. If someone puts down something like that, or a one word, no, said Richmond, it has to have last name, first name, or a last name and an initial first name. Wrong. What about Heathcliff? He didn't have, that was his name, Heathcliff. How about some people who just use one name to identify themselves? You find that sometimes in the rap world. But it doesn't matter where you find it. Whatever is put down is to be recorded. And if for a certain office, like Kings County dog catcher, there were over 6,000 write-ins for Mickey Mouse in a general election, something tells you about the actual candidates who are standing for election. That happened once, I believe, in Brazil, where Mickey Mouse got the plurality of votes for some state election. So it is wrong. You did not record all the write-ins. And that's the way it goes. You just have to put down whatever's there. Now, someone did say to me, well, what if it had something like kill all the Jews? That's a problem. What do you do? Well, I think you have to just put that in. That's what someone wrote in. Or work makes you free. Albert macht frei, something out of the Nazi concentration camps. Like niggers go to hell. You've got to record that. You can't say no.
I take offense to what you just said.
You may take offense, but you have to record what people write in. And whether you like it or not,
the way you're discussing things,
the way you like, whether you like it or not doesn't count. And you're a lawyer. Haven't you been in court where a judge says, I don't care what you think, let's look at the law?
Mr. Flax,
Maybe you haven't been in a side court.
I think you have.
I have, okay? I practice daily. That doesn't mean I have to sit here and listen to your rants.
No, then excuse yourself.
I don't appreciate it.
When we talk about talking about, sometimes we have license. Look at
Or is it a statement you're making? A question or a statement?
No, an example by saying,
a question?
if you don't like it, we can go on to other ethnic groups if you want and how they were.
It's not that get to the point what you're trying to
The point is, you should record what was there, but someone at a prior meeting spoke to me privately and said, what if we have something that's not pleasant?
You've made that point, so let's not
move on.
People don't write that in.
Let's
I have
not
not
cover
seen
that
that.
ground again, okay? Now, you seem to be getting at the point of questioning what we call here the normalization process, okay? So, you've had your opportunity to speak, and I think councils, Mr. Savino and Mr. Richmond, either collectively or unilaterally can give us a short explanation of the law and the normalization process in the procedures adopted by the commissioners.
Commissioners, the election law provides that when you canvass the votes, you have to make the determination to where the vote gets attributed. The State Board, in adopting Rule 6210.13, puts standards for write-in votes, for votes cast for a person whose name do not appear on the ballot. And they said that, yes, a voter need not write in the first and last name of a valid candidate in every situation. The standard is whether the election inspectors or the canvassing clerks can reasonably determine the intent of the voter when they cast that ballot. In accordance with that regulation, you adopted procedures reaffirmed, I believe, the week before the election this year in the revised canvass procedures that sets forth the standard for normalization of the votes. What we have determined is that A, you would require the first initial or an initial as well as the last name of the candidate. In addition, it had to be, at least appears to be, a real person eligible to be elected. And those are the standards you made, and I believe those are in accordance with the state board rules and regulations.
And so then the recanvassing procedure occurs in accordance with the statute, the state board regulations, and the adopted procedures of the board. So I think it's incumbent upon those that attend these meetings to raise these issues at the appropriate time. When we have public meetings, whether it be ballot layout committee meetings, adoption of procedures on how we're going to do things moving forward, I think there's ample opportunity for the public to come here on a weekly basis and raise these concerns. What I think troubles me from time to time is it seems like sometimes the easiest thing to do is in the moment do nothing, and in the aftermath criticize. And that is something that doesn't sit well with me, no matter what context it occurs in. And clearly, you know, when I'm the subject, or at least the participatory subject of the criticism, it certainly doesn't sit well with me when there's ample opportunity to fix these problems in the
Mr. Ryan, we can only criticize after we see what you have done. And are you saying that your working committees are open to the public?
Certainly.
Good.
And they've been not only open to the public, but the ballot layout committee has been open to the public, and is also available on the web, because we post them now too, in accordance with the municipal law here in New York City. So we make them as open as possible, and I believe Mr. Richmond has one further point of clarification.
Commissioner, the last part of the closing was the state board rules, and which is what we based our determination on when we adopted the procedures. It is impossible to determine the voter's choice of a candidate or candidates. So they talk about a candidate, somebody who's alive, for an office upon the official ballot. Such vote shall not be counted, but shall be returned as a blank vote. We use the term unrecorded in the, unattributable, I should say, in the, as opposed to a totally blank ballot, so that we have even more clarification, more transparency, that there was something scribbled into the space, but we could do it. It wasn't a blank vote.
Well, and let me just ask you as a point for my own clarification as well. Since there is an issue with the oval and the write-in box, and we clearly have taken the position that if somebody neglects to fill in the oval, but writes in the box, that counts. How do we attribute for reporting purpose if somebody fills in the oval but neglects to write somebody in the write-in space? Is that also an unattributable?
That would be a blank.
Or is that a blank?
That would
okay,
be
all right. Okay. Just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
But what about the fact, well, one reporter for a daily newspaper here wrote in names for every office to see if they will appear. I believe he's still going over the list I gave him. But what about this? I wrote in for governor a deceased person, Eleanor Roosevelt, and for lieutenant governor, Franklin, middle initial D, Roosevelt. Those people are dead. Under Mr. Richmond's, what he said, they would not be, is this off again?
No,
would not be recorded. They are dead people. Assuming, because when you see Eleanor and Franklin, you say, well, it's the former governor and his wife. Also, part two here is that, what about if people just write in teach out? That person is well known to many voters, and she got tons of votes citywide for governor and some other offices.
And to the extent that those write-ins were done in conformance with the statute, the state rules, and our procedures, those votes were in fact counted.
Even though just a last name, teach out.
Well, that would presume that no one else has the name teach out. So there has to be something other than just a last name that draws a line of distinction between Zephyr teach out and somebody else with the last name teach out. And so to simply presume that we should then attribute all of those votes that just say teach out to Zephyr teach out would be an inappropriate application of the law and our procedures. And I think that it's not like Cher or Madonna, right? I mean, where they're notorious figures, but somebody else could be Madonna and consider herself to be on the same par. So there has to be some standard, and at least a first initial and a last name, I don't think is too much to ask. And if somebody's gonna take the effort to do a write-in and fill in an oval and write a name, it's not too much to ask them to write one more letter. And I don't think that's an onerous standard for people to meet.
If there were instructions on the machine.
What I find curious, and I don't necessarily want the answer to, is that this is coming up from different sources on the same day, perhaps as some type of orchestrated effort, and I think...
I object.
I should object. I didn't object to the things that you said.
But you're now imputing motivation.
No, I'm not. I'm just making an observation. And I think that we've spent ample time on this, and I, for one, although it's not my call, I would say maybe we should move into executive session and discuss the...
I would like to make quickly a 10-second point that, Mr. Ryan, that you record. It's my submission that Mr. Richmond records both Zephyr Teach Out and Teach Out, if they're two separate things.
All right, during executive session, the commissioners voted on the following. The reduced temp allocation for the 2015 election cycle was approved for the borough offices. The general office temp allocation shall remain at 50 temp per county, and that there will be no meeting on 12/9, and the next scheduled meeting shall be 12/16 unless otherwise posted on our website. Is there a motion to adjourn the executive meeting? Second, all in favor? Anybody opposed or abstained? The motion carries.